Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are finishing up with the Puritan today. We get to hear from the Nobleman in Act 5, Scene 4 to wrap things up. So the Nobleman only exists in this scene, and he was brought in by Tipstaff and Muckhill and Skirmish, who are all upset at the tricks that Pieboard pulled, the forgeries, the trickeries, all of that, the waking up of Oath and the freeing of Idle and the whole chain bit and all that. So they brought in this gentleman, this nobleman, thinking that if he tells everybody what actually happened, they will believe it more so than they would believe it if it came from the jilted lovers, because the jilted lovers, they might have ulterior motives, whatever. But if a total stranger says, hey, these guys are tricksters, then people will be inclined to believe them. So yesterday, the nobleman confronted Lady Plus and was like, these two guys who you've chosen for husbands are idiots. Like, what are you doing? And Skirmish came in and he verified the false claims, because remember, he had been a co-conspirator, so he was able to say, like, yeah, all of this was fake. And Godfrey was just livid about his whole chain thing, and he's angry with Nicholas for taking the chain and hiding it in the garden and everything like that. But then the nobleman says, nay, knight, dwell in peace. And now, widow, being so near the church, 'twere great pity, nay, uncharity, to send you home again without a husband. Draw near, you of true worship, state, and credit, that should not stand so far off from a widow, and suffer forged shapes to come between you. Not that in these I blemish the true title of a captain, or blot the fair margent of a scholar, for I honor worthy and deserving parts in the one, and cherish fruitful virtues in the other. Come, lady, and you, virgin, bestow your eyes and your purest affections upon men of estimation, both in court and city, that have long wooed you, and both with their hearts and wealth sincerely love you. So what he's saying is, okay, I know everybody's mad at Pieboard and at Captain Idle. And he's like, not that I'm saying that captains are bad or scholars are bad, because I actually really value both for different reasons. But he's like, get it that you don't want to marry them, but we're already at a church that's ready to perform some weddings. So why don't you marry these other two guys who love you? Marry Tipstaff and marry Muckhill. And at the end of this monologue, it's not Lady Plus who answers immediately. It's somebody else who says her silence indicates agreement, which there's so much to unpack in that sentence there. But Lady Plus does actually apologize to the suitors for not being more receptive to their advances. And then she and Francis agree that yes, they will marry Tipstaff and Muckhill. And then Moll is like, and yay, I got to marry Pennydub. And that's basically the end of the play. The nobleman says a couple more words about how let's all just go be happy and we'll get them married, and huzzah, we'll all live happily ever after. And that's the end of the play, which is an interesting way to end it, because there's a lot that reminds me of like a typical romantic comedy, especially this, Act 4 and Act 5. You have these women, you have Pieboard, and you have Idle, and you have Oath, and you have all this going on, and the women start to fall for the men, but then they find out that the men are tricksters. But in a modern romantic comedy, they would find out that the men are tricksters, but then the men would apologize and they would end up getting married anyway. In this one, they find out that the men are tricksters, so they end up marrying completely different men, which is an interesting way to go about it, and it sort of falls into that women as prizes trope, which is a little bit, technically, if you wanted to get really picky about it, if Lady Plus and Francis had originally not wanted to get married, but then decided that they had crushes on these tricksters, but then were turned off of the tricksters, they should be able to go back to their desire to not get married at all. That would seem to be the logical progression to me, as opposed to them now just marrying a couple of guys because they happen to stand there and because these men happen to like them. It's one of those, who cares if the women like them? But anyway, that's me looking at it from a lens 400 years after it was actually written. But there is a lot about this play that I really enjoyed. It's whimsical, it's farcical, it's fun. The trickery and the sort of the childish plotting and all of that sort of thing that Pyboard does is actually, it's fun and it's silly. Like when they try to convince Edmund that he's invisible, like it's all just, yeah. And this is one, it's a comedy. Some of the other comedies that we've been looking at lately are comedic to a certain point, and then there's like somebody dies or something horrible happens to somebody. Where in this one, you know, the threat of Skirmish actually being executed isn't really there because we all know that Oath isn't actually dead. So it's stressful for Skirmish, but it doesn't necessarily like raise the audience's blood pressure that something bad is going to happen to him. But anyway, I thought it was sort of a fun play with a sort of weird ending. The other weird bit about the ending is that we don't find out what happens to Pyboard and Idle. Once this is all over, they are exposed, but they don't really have lines after that point. So I've read some synopses that say they make their escape, but there's no stage direction saying that they leave or anything like that. It's maybe they just slink off stage once they've been exposed. I don't know. So we don't actually know what happens to them, and there's no actual repercussions against them for having been tricksters. So that little bit isn't quite resolved. But anyway, it's still sort of a fun piece. I would love to know what you thought. Please leave stuff in the comments. And then tomorrow, we start in on a brand new play. So I'll see you then for that. Mwah.